On the world's deadliest gangs tonight, we visit the wild west of the new millennium. At the border of Mexico and the USA, there's a group of drug barons whose sole existence is getting hard drugs over the perimeter fence and into the US. It's a simple exchange in theory, but it's loaded with kidnappings, shootings and gangland murders. It's the operation of the Tijuana Drugs Cartel. They are brutal killers and one of the most dangerous gangs in the world.
In tonight's show, gang warfare. The elusive brothers who claim to have won the drugs war, the rise and fall of Tijuana's Mr. Big. But first, the terrifying world of the Tijuana Drugs Cartel. Tijuana, Mexico. Sitting 7 miles from California, it's one of the world's most notorious border towns. Home to prostitutes, pornography, and some of the world's deadliest gangs.
Tijuana is the Wild West. Tijuana, I was born in Tijuana, and it hasn't changed much in terms of its wild nature.
Tijuana is an interesting place in that there's so much happening there. It's the gateway to the United States. For the traffickers, it's a bonanza because you have San Diego and then you have Los Angeles very close.
Subject of the hit Oscar-winning film Traffic, Tijuana is the gateway to the United States and its explosive drugs demand.
The bottom line here is we have an insatiable demand for drugs in the United States. It's a disgrace. It's something we should be ashamed of.
In recent years, however, the balance of power has changed in Latin America's drug industry.
In the old days, the Colombians would basically pay Mexican cartels to ship cocaine and heroin through Mexico and into the United States.
This used to be the way the drugs trade worked in Latin America. But when George Bush Sr. came down heavy on Colombian drug lords like Pablo Escobar, there was a seismic shift in the power structure.
And for the drug kingpins, the death penalty.
The change came when the Mexican cartels started buying wholesale lots of cocaine and heroin from the Colombians and taking over that business of marketing the drugs in the United States. That increased their profits. It increased their involvement in the whole drug business, and in some cases made them more powerful than even the Colombian producers.
The demise of the Colombian drug lords paved the way for a new generation of gangs based in Tijuana, all fighting for valuable territory. The street gangs of Tijuana have had free reign of drugs traffic for the last 10 years. The best efforts of US and Mexican law enforcement having very little impact. But out of nowhere, a seemingly unlinked act of terror outside of the cartel's control changed everything.
September 11th also impacted the cartel. When the terrorist strikes occurred in Washington and New York at the World Trade Center, the US government cracked down on the border with Mexico as a safety precaution. What's happened there is that it's cut off a vital avenue of getting drugs into the United States. The most popular way of getting drugs into the United States is by putting it under the seat of a car, putting it on individuals who are crossing the border. Now, since the United States was inspecting almost every vehicle that crossed into the United States from Mexico after September 11th, the drug dealers decided that it was too risky. So probably for a period of about, I would say, 3 weeks after September 11th, there was virtually no drug business between Mexico and the United States. It came to a grinding halt.
With the drugs piling up, the gangs were forced to move the drugs, and as a result, they played right into the hands of the authorities.
Since then, seizures along the border have increased, and U.S. authorities believe it's because the drug dealers simply have to move their products. They have bills to pay.
There's every indication that they're having a hard time paying for drug loads consigned from South America. And when the money dries up, quite honestly, that's pretty good sign that they're through.
Still to come, gang style, the street gangs glorified by Hollywood. The rise and fall of Tijuana's Mr. Big. But first, gang warfare. The end of the 20th century saw the beginning of a new wave of Tijuana drug gangs. The biggest and most brutal was run by two brothers.
The AFO was controlled by the brothers, primarily two brothers, Benjamin Arellano Felix and his brother Ramon. Benjamin can be described as someone more or less the brains of the organization, and I don't want to give him too much credit as far as being intelligent, because there's a big difference between intelligence and being a ruthless killer.
The DEA has estimated that this gang are now the main suppliers of narcotics that flood into the states.
What quantity of drugs is the AFO moving? That is anybody's guess, but I can guarantee you it's tons.
They are responsible for virtually all of the cocaine and heroin traffic that goes from Mexico to the southwestern part of the United States. That would be California, Arizona, and New Mexico, all the way out even to Texas, where they dispute territory with the Juarez Cartel.
The Juarez gang are the AFO's most bitter rivals, each competing for the power and control of vital smuggling territory. An assassination attempt on the Juarez gang and key member Chapo Guzman really brought the AFO into the spotlight. But the hitman hit the wrong man. A leading cardinal of the Mexican Catholic Church was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Unfortunately for the cardinal was dressed in such a manner that it appeared that it was Joaquin Chapo Guzman. And lo and behold, they thought they had him there. Well, they opened up and they killed the cardinal and really put their name on the screen as far as being real menaces to society.
The brutal murder of the cardinal was the start of the AFO's bloody campaign of power and control of Mexico's drug industry. The authorities seemed incapable of stopping the violence, until one day, the AFO went too far.
They killed 3 Mexican federal agents, 3 individuals who were probably some of the cleanest cops in Mexico. These 3 individuals were kidnapped, tortured. One officer's head was put into a pneumatic vise, and then the bodies were dumped down a ravine, a desert ravine outside of Tijuana. Those murders royally upset American drug enforcement agents who were working with the individuals. And they've told me privately that getting the Arellano Felix to them would be a kind of vengeance for them.
I think it would be the cap of my career to see these people picked up. In all my years in this job, I've never met a more vicious group of people than this crowd.
The net began to close upon the AFO as both Mexican and US law enforcement concentrated all their efforts on catching them. However, it didn't prove easy.
These guys have been the subject of several manhunts now over the last few years that have yielded nothing. One Mexican official told me that the reason why these manhunts have not yielded anything is because there is so much corruption.
Some of these police officers down in Mexico, Tijuana, are making $200 a month, $300 a month. Hey, if they have to feed a family, where are they going to go for their money? Well, the obvious answer is the traffickers. They can make literally thousands of dollars a week by aiding the traffickers in their endeavors. So.
These guys put out probably weekly about $1 million in bribes to Mexican officials to keep them off their backs.
The elusive and hostile AFO forced US and Mexican officials to up the stakes in their bid to end their reign of terror.
They feed off of each other, and these people are not human beings. They are animals. And we would love to see both of them picked up. We're currently offering a $2 million award for their capture.
El último reporte que tuvimos es de que I don't think that they have many more places to hide. The last report we had is that they have had plastic surgery and liposuction and are very thin now.
Muy delgados.
They still have protection. Their demise, the end of their reign, is maybe not a day away, a week away, a month away, but it's coming.
More tales from the gangland after the break, including dress codes, branding, and gang warfare. Remember, dead men don't tell lies. Welcome back to the world's deadliest gangs. Tonight, we're on the Mexican borderlands. A string of dead-end towns, cheap drugs, and nothing but sex shows. But home to the infamous Tijuana drugs cartel. These guys live by the gun and they die by the gun. Now, in between all that, they try and get their hands on as much cocaine as possible. Now, it's fast living, big business. Now, while they're out there trying to be naughty little businessmen, they also like to look good too.
Within the Tijuana drugs cartel, the majority of the street gang members emerge from the ghetto of Logan Heights in classic street gang mode. Tattoos, chains, baggy trousers, and hand signals.
They'll form their hands into an L and an H. They'll write on the wall LH, 30th Street, Calle 30. Their names, they'll list their names, their street names, and they all have street names. And they'll put their gang on top of it or beside it. They'll cross out rival gangs and write their names on it.
In Southern California, the population is dominated by immigrants from Latin countries. Their language is Spanish, and they bring their own culture to California. One of the stronger parts is the art of being macho.
Southern Hispanic street gangs usually dress alike. They'll wear their pants extra baggy. They'll wear their shorts long and their socks very high. They won't show their legs because that's a sign of feminism or being gay or being homosexual, which is a big no-no with Southern Hispanic street gangs.
The Logan Heights gang, like many Latino gangs, is also heavily influenced by hip-hop and display many of the typical fashion statements of an American street gang.
Hip-hop culture meant that the boy on the street, the girl on the street, wore the first and most important thing on their wardrobe is their trainers. Somewhere along the way, the footwear, sportswear companies decided to do less thinner trainers and more like moon boot based trainers that are thick. You couldn't wear those trainers with tight trousers, look very effeminate, and you couldn't wear those trainers with tight trousers and a tight top, it doesn't look the part. So somewhere along the way, people like Tommy Hilfiger, etc., and the designers of that ilk decided to do baggy trousers to go with the chunky look, and the shirts became ever more exaggerated in their size.
As the money came in, the Logan gang moved from being street thugs into sophisticated cartel assassins, and this involved a dramatic change of image.
Their dress used to set them apart. More and more, they're dressing like anybody else would, because there are limits put on them by parole and by probation. If they're caught dressing a certain way, they can be violated and put back into prison. So they're starting to become more sophisticated.
It was crime that provided the impetus, changing the gang members from ordinary street criminals into highly paid assassins, and eventually attracting the attention of Hollywood.
Well, the film Traffic would be fairly typical of the Tijuana drug cartels, because the assassins in that film were wearing black, and the other gangsters were looking very, very flash. They were looking as though they were about to go to Las Vegas to win money in a casino there.
These guys were making $500 a week when they started. They had cars. They were given money for clothes. They had that status. They were going back to the neighborhood wearing designer jeans, wearing the gold chains, driving nice cars.
People that come from a low socioeconomic background, it's hardly surprising that they want to dress up. The sharp suits, the gold jewelry, the use of brand labels, all of these things are ways of marking the fact that you've become a successful person in your culture.
The hired killer from the Logan gang had started out with knives and knuckle dusters, but by the end of their careers were sporting high-velocity rifles and rocket launchers. Their dress had gone from Adidas to Armani, and they were living like kings. But those who fly too close to the sun will inevitably get burned. San Diego, California, a cultural melting pot, a stone's throw from the Mexican border. The Logan Heights district of San Diego is a stronghold for Hispanic street gangs, but they're considered petty thugs when compared with the high-flying gangs like the AFO. However, the two have a dangerous and deadly link.
Well, the AFO is related to the street gangs primarily through an individual by the name of David Barone Corona.
David Barone grew up in the Logan Heights area of San Diego, and he was a Logan Heights 30th Street gang member.
Barone was seen as a menace to society when he was still just a boy. From the age of 16, he was involved in a string of violent crimes. His dangerous character really came to light.
David Barone served 6 years in the prison system as a result of his conviction for manslaughter at the age of 16.
He was in prison here in the United States, and while he was in prison, he made a lot of contacts with people.
David Barone, while in the state penal systems, he met a higher level of criminal. He met a more sophisticated criminal. He met members of the Arellano Felix organization, and he came out with those added tools.
He was a criminal's criminal, very violent, very much in the manner of Ramon.
When Barone was released from prison in 1991, US law enforcement were desperate for any excuse to send him back.
San Diego Police Department did follow David around very tightly. They did keep an eye on him to make sure that we caught him doing something wrong and sent him back. So feeling all that heat, all that pressure, David moved to Tijuana on a full-time basis in 1991.
Once Barone moved to Tijuana and working full-time for the AFO, he began to use his old neighborhood of Logan Heights as a recruitment ground.
When David began recruiting guys in 1992, a lot of them said yes. They just saw his appearance change, the gold chains, the cars, through the murders and through the assaults that he did, because he was highly regarded by everybody he had come in contact with. They felt very loyal to him, and a lot of them wanted to be like David. A lot of them wanted to associate themselves with him to see what he was into.
The AFO offered a new life for these kids and these street kids in San Diego here. Again, through David Barone, they were taken to Tijuana and literally going to Mexico with nothing on but the clothes on their back.
They didn't exactly know what they were getting into, and once they went down there, they were very surprised.
They got down there and they were doing the dirty work for these people. They were murdering people, torturing people, and doing all the deeds of the AFO. So they offered them, prestige, status, and when you have undernourished egos and people living in poverty and the have-nots, then that's a very seductive.
Now that Barone had his special army in place, he was able to conduct a reign of terror in the name of the AFO.
So David was fighting a war for the Arellanos, and a lot of the violence from Tijuana was bleeding into San Diego. We had a lot of homicides with automatic weapons, hundreds of rounds fired, people being, pelted with numerous rounds, and we were scratching our heads. As cops, we were in a room scratching our heads thinking, what the hell's going on? And it came to light, soon thereafter, that Barone and his band of enforcers from Logan Heights and Pozole were responsible for a lot of the murders.
Both Mexican and US law enforcement were desperate to find Barone and put an end to his world of death and violence. Years of casework produced nothing. The end came from an unexpected source.
David Barone's downfall was an act of God. It was an accident. It's nothing that we did.
Jesus Blancorneos, editor of Tijuana's leading magazine, Zeta, wrote an article implying that the death of 2 army officials was the work of Barone.
He wrote it in a way that upset Barone, made him mad, made him furious. So David, along with members of his enforcement squad, set up on Blancornelos, followed him around.
They intercepted us and wound down the window of the car. And on the opposite side, a driver and a man with a pistol started to shoot. At the same time, there was gunfire from every direction.
So David got out of the vehicle that he was driving, a stolen vehicle out of San Diego, and he walked up to the car that Blanc Cornelis was in with his shotgun. He wanted to make it personal. He wanted to get it close, and I think he wanted Blanc Cornelis to see who his murderer was.
In the confusion and gunfire, there were stray bullets flying everywhere.
And as David was approaching the vehicle, a fragment of an AK-47 round hit him in the left eye, I believe, and killed him instantly.
As Baron's body lay slumped dead against a wall, his foot soldiers from Logan Heights left him there to die. Through none of their own doing, however, law enforcement's quest to get their man was over.
I think it was divine intervention, that God finally intervened because we weren't having a lot of luck tracking him. I don't know if we would ever got him. You know, I wish we could have. I wish we could have brought him to justice and let the community know what this guy was all about. Yes, I wish we could have did that, but at the same time, I think that his surprising death was probably the best thing that could have happened.
The violent world of drugs, porn and murder on the America-Mexico border provides the Tijuana drugs cartel with the ideal terrain to flourish as one of the world's deadliest gangs.
Well, that's all we've got time for on the world's deadliest gangs. If you're worried about organised crime and gang warfare, remember, I can't help you, pal. I've got to get out of here. Later. Bank robbery, money, and the most feared of all. Or Gangchester. Fucking come on in, hey! Kidnapping, power, firm, the yardies. If you have any trouble with organised crime, yeah? Call 1-800-Big Tony. Very naughty. The world's most dangerous cities. The Hell's Angels. The drugs cartel. The Bloods, the Crips. Hijacking and murder. The world's deadliest gangs.